Hello everybody, my name is Charles Cabrera, and in this Photoshop tutorial I'm going to share 21 keyboard shortcuts to help you speed up your workflow in Photoshop. So some of the most useful keyboard shortcuts have to do with zooming. We want to get into those details into the image and work very closely. So to start off, if you click Z, that will give you the zoom tool. And one thing you can do is you can just click and it will zoom in. If I put my magnifying glass right over her earring and click, it zooms in mainly on that point. If I want to zoom back out, I just press Option on Mac, Alt on PC, and my magnifying glass turns to a minus, and I click and I'm zooming out again. And if you want to zoom in the whole image, just press Command on Mac and Control on Windows and the plus sign, and you're zooming in the whole image. And if you want to zoom out the whole image, it is Command minus on Mac and Control minus on Windows, and I'm zooming out. If I'm zoomed in on an image and I want to pan around, if I hold down the space bar, my cursor turns into a hand, and I can just click and drag around the image so I can take care of all the fine details if I'm working on retouching. And if I want to fit the image to screen, it's Command 0 on Mac and Control 0 on Windows, and there I've fit the image to screen. So those are big help if you're trying to get any close to those details. So another tool that we use a lot in Photoshop is the brush tool, and with that there are a lot of keyboard shortcuts that will help our workflow go more smoothly. So B for the brush tool, and up here at the top is one of the ways that you can get to all the settings for your brush tool, all the settings for brushes, all the different brushes you can select, your brush size, your brush hardness, but we don't need to go through all that. By the way, you can get to all your brush settings by right-clicking while using the brush tool, and there it is. Another way to get to it. In order to increase your brush size, you can use the right and left brackets. So I can use my left bracket to make my brush smaller. Also, you can use the parentheses, which is right above the bracket, and you can use that. And if I hit that and draw, so that is a softer brush than above. I hit that again, and I can make it harder by using the right parentheses. So same keyboard shortcuts on Mac and PC. Use the right and left brackets to make your brush larger and smaller, and the right and left parentheses to make your brush either softer or harder. So there's another way to control your brush size and the brush hardness. On Mac, it's Control Option. On PC, it's Control Alt right-click and drag. So I'm on a Mac, so Control Alt, and if I click and drag, here's my brush size getting smaller and larger. If I drag up and down, my brush is getting softer and it's getting harder. So that's another way to control your brush size and hardness. And this one's a little bit more graphical, or shows you before you actually start drawing. And a little tip when you're using your brush, if you want to draw a straight line, you can dab it right there, hold down Shift, and Photoshop will draw a straight line using your brush. You can do that with other tools too, like for instance the pen tool. You can hold down Shift. Most of these tools that are drawing tools will allow you to use the Shift key to help you draw straight or paint straight. And there's a really useful keyboard shortcut when you're using the brush and you want to sample colors. So B for the brush tool, hold down Option or Alt, and my brush tool turns into an eyedropper. So I could sample here in this image, like the color on her lips. But what if I want to sample and paint maybe some eyeshadow? Well, I can sample this from a lot of different places. If I had a library of colors that I wanted to choose from, or I can sample from outside of Photoshop. So again, if I hold Option or Alt and click and don't let up, go outside of Photoshop, and you can see the foreground color over there on the right is just changing to all these different colors out here. I'm sampling everything outside of Photoshop. So I can sample, say, this eyeshadow right here, come back into my image, and I'm going to paint a little bit of this up here. Obviously that's too much. Just say for illustration, I painted all this in and it's way too much, way too high. A very useful keyboard shortcut that I just discovered is if I hold down the tilde key and I brush, I'm erasing all this area in here. It's better than going over to the eraser tool, and I could take down my opacity even more. But you get the idea. So that's another cool keyboard shortcut for the brush tool. So when we're working on our images and we just open up an image, it is really good idea to duplicate the background layer or duplicate the first layer that's here, like in this photo. So just to duplicate this layer via copy, it's Command J on Mac, Control J on Windows. And so we've duplicated the base layer or the background layer just to be safe. We always have the background layer or the bottom layer to fall back on in case we've made some mistakes or we need to get some more information from it. But then as we're working in Photoshop, we may need to make working layers, and a lot of times they are blank layers. So to create a new blank layer on the Mac, it's Shift+N on Mac. On Windows, it's Shift+N. So Shift+N, and this method brings up the new layer dialog box, which you can name the layer, and you can use all these other parameters, like you can fill the layer, you can use the different blending modes, and have things kind of set up for you already as you create a new layer. If you don't want all that and you just want a blank layer, on a Mac it's Shift+Alt+N. On Windows it's Shift+N. So Mac, Shift+Alt+N, and there is my new layer. And now I can work on that layer. I can paint on it, fill it with another color. So if I want to do something with this layer, if I want to make some color adjustments, some brightness adjustments, I can use the Camera Raw filter. Now, if you're not familiar with the Camera Raw filter, I have a video that I will link up in the card and down in the description, and you can learn all about Camera Raw. It's just like making adjustments in Lightroom. So on Mac, it's Shift+A. On Windows, it's Shift+A. If you're going to use any of the filters, and in this case the Camera Raw filter, it needs to be on a layer that is visible, like this layer right here. So again, on Mac, Shift+A, and here we are in the Camera Raw dialog box, and you can make changes to the exposure, contrast, highlights, any little touch-up you need to make here in Photoshop, and then you say OK. Now a lot of times when we're working on an image, we want to desaturate the image to get a better look at the image, maybe without color. And so that shortcut is Command-Shift-U on Mac. On Windows, it's Control-Shift-J. So Command-Shift-U, and that image is desaturated. Like I say, this is handy for you to see. Sometimes looking at something in black and white or near black and white will help you with adjusting or blending images into scenes We can undo this desaturate layer by Command Z on Mac and Control Z on Windows. So it's an undo, and if we want to revert back to desaturate again or redo a change, we add Shift to those modifiers. So it's Shift Command Z on Mac and Shift Control Z on PC. So Shift Command Z puts us back into what we had before, Command Z to undo that. So let's make a selection. We come up here and we can either use the rectangular marquee or the elliptical marquee. Let's use the elliptical marquee. And we're going to make a selection around this guy. If you hold down the Shift, you can move your selection around. And if I don't want that selection anymore, I can get rid of that selection by Command D on Mac and Control D on Windows. So my selection is gone. If I wanted to, I could have saved that selection somewhere, but if I didn't and I want to bring back the last selection, you can reselect by hitting Command Shift D on Mac and Control Shift D on Windows. Command Shift D, and there is my selection. It is back again. So I want to fill in this shape right here, but I don't want to fill in around the dog. So I'm going to come up here to select and say inverse. And so I want to fill that shape, and I'm going to hit Shift F5, and it's Shift F5 on Windows 2. So this brings up the fill dialog box. I can fill the contents of that with the foreground color, background color, or any of these, use any of these modes here. And I'm going to say OK. And of course, I can do other things with this. I can drop the opacity and work on this, but you get the idea. It's filling a shape. If I want to hide that selection temporarily, I can hit Command or Control H. It goes away. Command or Control H brings it back. Command or Control D to deselect. Another useful keyboard shortcut, if I create a blank layer, I'm on a Mac, so I want to create a new blank layer, and I don't want to see that dialog. So it's Shift Command Alt N. There's my new layer. I want to come over here to the color picker, click on that, and I want to sample this color in here in the leaves and say OK. So now my foreground color was chosen. A lot of times what you want to do is you want to fill a layer with a color. I'm going to just choose another color here, just so there's something in the foreground and background colors over here in the color picker. So now if I want to fill this layer here with a color, either my background color or foreground color, on Mac, Alt-Delete will fill with your foreground color, or Command-Delete will fill with your background color. On Windows, Alt-Delete for foreground color, or Control-Delete for background color. So I'm on a Mac, so Alt-Delete just filled my layer, my blank layer, with the foreground color. And now I can come in and I can change my blend mode to soft light, and I can bring down my opacity a little bit. So that added some different coloring to the image. See, there's before and there's the after. Kind of made everybody more like an autumn color in there. And the final keyboard shortcut, if I want to save as, like maybe I want to save this as a Photoshop format or a TIFF format, it's Command Shift S on Mac or Control Shift S on Windows. So Command Shift S, and here's my Save As dialog box. And down here I can select the different formats. This happens to be defaulted to Photoshop, and I can say save. If this video was helpful, give it a like and don't forget to subscribe. Check out my other videos on using shortcuts with free transform and Photoshop layers. And remember, it's never too late to learn. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.